My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Thursday, May 28th, and I'm interviewing Scott Roberts for the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Scott, you're a Creek tribal citizen. I understand you have some Choctaw heritage too. You began doing traditional Woodland and Mississippian style pottery in 2005, but prior to that you had been interested in anthropology and archaeology. You've won a number of awards for your hand-built pit-fired pottery and had several museums purchase your pots. You also make and sell other cultural items at times. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Wetumka, Oklahoma, and grew up there. And Wetumka means flowing water in creek, and that's where I did my high school, and that's where I dig my clay, is at Wetumka.
What did your father do for a living, mother and father?
He was in the oil field business, and he was an oil field pumper, is what he did. I did some too.
How about your mom?
Mom, she was just a homemaker.
Did you have siblings?
Got two boys. Our first little girl had spina bifida, and she died at age 3. But we have the two boys.
I'm sorry. How about brothers or sisters growing up?
Had 3 sisters, and one of those has passed, my oldest sister.
What was your relationship with your grandparents on either side, or both?
My grandfather on the, and well, no, I knew my grandmother. She was blind from cataracts. And then my grandfather, he was a farmer, and he passed before I was born, so I never knew him. On the other side, my grandmother, that's where I get my native heritage.
Is it the paternal or maternal side? On your dad's side or your mom's side?
It was my dad's side, my dad's mother. And then my granddad, I don't even like to talk about him. He was just no good. So I just he mistreated my grandmother real bad.
But your grandmother did share some stories with you, and you were close to her.
Yes, and she knew a lot of the native ways in the way of making the lye and all of these things, and she was a very Christian woman. And
was she a speaker as well? Creek speaker?
yes, she could, but she wouldn't, because she was taught not to speak the language in her boarding school. So she was really mistreated in the boarding school.
And that
so
was,
she just didn't like to even talk about it.
right. And that was down there in the same area?
Yes.
Area.
It was a mission school, and we just knew it as Mission Bottom School, and it was in the Wewoka Creek Bottom, is where it was at. And at one time was a large complex. It had gardens, they raised their own food, and had the butcher shop, had blacksmith shops, they had the hospital. And it, like I say, it was a large complex.
Now, I don't know if I read correctly, sometimes it's not all accurate. Do you have some Choctaw heritage on your creek side as well, or not?
It would, yes, it would have been on my creek side.
What kinds of exposure did you have to Native art growing up?
Not much. I was always interested in it. I used to make little clay figures for my sisters and stuff, and I didn't have anyone to teach me that they needed to be fired. And I know my grandmother knew that, but she wouldn't share that with me at all. And they'd put water in a little glass or teapot and it'd fall apart, and then they'd get mad at me.
What, your
thinking,
sisters? Or?
They're my sisters. And and then later on, when I started my art, I used the same clay to make my art.
From your family
So,
land. Well,
I never let something like that beat me.
That's great. So from the very beginning, you were drawn to three-dimensional.
I was drawn to the clay from the very beginning, when I was just a child. So, and I was working and messing with clay all the time.
Did you get any compliments or support from your family from
No.
being interested in that?
No, not at all. And I've always been interested in art. And I had a boss when I was working in the oil business that wanted me to stay in the oil business, and my dad, he had got really bad injured 2 or 3 times in the oil business, and he didn't want me doing that. So then I went to Okmulgee and trained to be a draftsman.
Okmulgee Tech.
Okmulgee Tech then, yes. And I went through drafting, and I was working at Midland Co-op in Cushing, where Gene's parents lived, and it was a refinery, and I was a pipe draftsman, and that's when our daughter was born. They had spina bifida, and then we moved to Oklahoma City. And to get a job and get started in a hurry, I took up auto body technician. And as soon as I got out of school, I was good enough in it that they hired me as a teacher for a while to teach body work. So
Here in Oklahoma
that was
City.
the main reason I got into that, for the art part of it, more than just building cars. And it became a good enough profession that that's what I spent my career as.
What about just going back to your art experiences in elementary school? Did you are there any highlight memories or?
Yes, I in the 3rd grade, and I still have it, they had me do a complete thing of the birth of Christ, and I believe I did it in chalk. But I remember that was my first real experience. And I did the wise men in Bethlehem, and it went completely across the...
Like a mural?
Sort of on paper. And that was the first really art experience, but I've always enjoyed drawing and painting like that and all, so...
And you had access to more materials. Did you have get any kind of base in middle school or high school in art?
No, I had a shop, a wood shop, and we took turns on checking out tools to the other kids. And when it became my time, I couldn't work on my project, so I got in there and got me a wood file, and I carved out a jet airplane and got in real bad trouble for doing that. So I didn't do any more of that. But I did that in one class with a wood rasp and
And got it
chunk of wood.
finished and
Of course, it got taken away and done away with, which I wish I had it now. But
because that might have been a
that was-
possible medium too.
Yes.
Well, so working in the automotive business, did you have the opportunity to do like painting of designs on the cars, or was it all repair work?
Well, I first started out teaching painting on the cars, and then when I went actually to another shop, I spent 27 years at Bowen Oldsmobile. And when I started, you learn how to shrink metal and all of this and fix the parts instead of replace them. And that was the part that I really enjoyed, and learn how to actually work metal.
Mm-hmm.
And like metallurgy, that you had to learn how to shrink metal, and you make a fender look like the other side.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're already doing a little bit of duplicating there, in a sense.
Yes.
Were you doing drawing on the weekends, or when did you get into your pottery again?
No, not at all. I was just hard at work making a living.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got hurt and they made me retire, that's when I took up my art with pottery.
When did that happen?
Oh, I'm not sure.
2005.
75,
This is-
2005.
2005.
This is Jean, Scott's wife, helping us to remember.
Yes, I can.
2005. Prior to that, however, you'd been involved with some archaeological associations?
Yes, I've studied anthropology and archaeology since, the early 70s, and I've always been interested in it.
How did you happen to decide to join a group, or?
I don't know, it was something that was always interesting to me, and they would go on the digs and things like this, and really enjoyed that.
So you were mentioning that you have saved a lot of sherds from pottery.
Yes.
What was it like running across your
I have
first pot
some
in a
right
dig?
here. But yeah, there was, I've got lots of just sherds that we surface found. And at the time we were in the Anthropology Association in the early 70s, we found new sites and we registered the sites, see. So they're registered at the survey down at OU.
Where were you working? What areas of Oklahoma?
Oh, Lake Wister, Ten Killer, Buffalo River in Arkansas, and around my hometown, around Wetumka. And that was the main places. I didn't do anything out west hardly at all. Some down on the Choctaw River. And that is mainly, and now they got so persnickety about even surface collecting, I just gave it up.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes Native people have had trouble getting anthropologists to recognize the fact that they have some cultural knowledge to bring to the process. What was your experience being in an association like that in the 70s? Were there certain attitudes, and did those attitudes
No, not
change?
really. That mainly came later. And a lot of the artifacts that we found and all really had nothing to do with the people of today.
Mm-hmm. People currently in
Older, most of it
Oklahoma.
was older stuff. And that was some of the, like, Spiral Mounds. They're not even sure now that it was even Caddo.
Mm-hmm.
That the archaeologist, a state archaeologist, says now that he can prove that all the artifacts in Spiro came from Cahokia.
Mm.
So,
So when did you start thinking, I need to make pottery? I mean, was it just because you were no longer working,
just
you had to retire?
just as a hobby, just started. I was actually more interested in sculpture, and I had some occasions to make some pieces and showed them, and
At art shows?
in art shows, yeah, and
What material?
started winning right off the bat, winning awards, and then it just pretty well took over my life.
What material were you working in at that point?
Hand dug
sculpture.
clay,
For sculpture?
mostly hand dug clay,
Okay.
and that's why I've tried commercial clays, and I have found one right now that I believe I could use for sculptures, but it turns out to be a white clay, which I call it my blue clay, is if you get the pure stuff, it is white, and but I just use it for color, and it's just a small vein down east of Thoploco Church, and that's in Mvskoke County.
Mm-hmm. Were you doing figurative sculpture then, and what was the scale?
Oh yeah, I took a course with Glenn Thomas down at the Art Center, and that was the main thing.
Were they native figures that you were doing at
Well, I
first?
did, the first was an animal figure, and then the other was a bust of a native. And then some little rugrats knocked it off and broke it before it ever got fired. So that's been my experience.
And you were also doing pit firing with your sculptures?
Yes.
Okay. Never
Yes, I
have used
didn't
an
have
electric
a
kiln?
Kiln then. I have a kiln now, but it just has one coil working on it. And when I do repairs on pottery for people, I use that, and it'll come to a temperature that I can. But I use that so I can control the temperature better to repair with.
Right. What was your goal in producing pots? Was it pottery? Was it always to sort of reproduce ancient forms? Is that kind of how it started?
Yeah, mainly. I just do the ancient forms and bring them more to a fine art form, is what I do. And I have trouble with the traditional look because of my body experience, auto body experience. All I knew then was slick, and I can't work myself away from that.
You like
I
the
will
high
have some
plus.
pieces at Red Earth that I've tried more to get them to look more, but I highly burnish my pieces, And it takes a long time to do the burnish work that I do.
Did you take any pottery workshops before you started?
No, self-taught. And my research on fiber tempering and stuff like this, I did all of it on my own. And then I just took always a weekend workshop at Okmulgee at the council house with Crystal Hanna and Victoria Vasquez. And that's when I first did more of the native style pottery, and then from there I was self-taught.
Ballpark, what year that you
Oh,
took the workshop?
that would have been about 12 years ago. That'd be,
Okay, 2003.
and so I haven't been in it really long like a lot of them.
Yeah, and you've really gotten a lot of attention and quickly made a name for yourself. Where did you research your early designs?
Oh, mainly from books and stuff that I've studied, which to potters, sun circles and human hands is the Bible to most of the potters. But and then I was a member of the Central Archaeology Association, and still am right now, and I don't go along with a lot of what they're doing, but a lot of my designs come from there that you don't see in museums or books or anything else.
What are they doing that's...
They're digging graves.
Oh,
Yes, I'm very upset with that.
yes.
They have found that they can go over in northeastern Arkansas and pay farmers to lease their land. They just mine it.
Oh my goodness.
They can pay them more than what they can make on a crop.
Mm-hmm.
So you go over there in airplane or an aircraft, and it's just potholes just everywhere.
Wow.
And I really hate that. That's very sacred. And the pieces that I do are mainly pieces that came from graves.
Mm.
You utilitarian, you don't ever see them hardly in shows.
Mm-hmm.
Your sake pots and things like this, cooking pots.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the cooking pots had a cone shape, and they didn't set flat. They would actually set them down in the ground or propped up with rocks, and then they'd move the coals up next to it to get it boiling, because it was a low-fired pottery, and you would start it cooking just like you would to fire a pot. Mm-hmm. So, but the fiber tempering, what started me experimenting with that, it was in a Central Archaeology magazine, and it was very clear that the side of the pot had blown out in the firing, and they had made a paste and patched the paste and with it and refired it. And that was the first experience that I saw of one actually repaired.
Using fiber for temper. What kind of fiber?
I used cattail fluff.
Okay.
I've never tried any other. So
Do you know if that was what was present in that repair,
I feel
that
like
early
it had
pot?
to be. And what the cattail fluff will do, it binds like this to the clay, and it'll actually go in the pores if you scratch that a little bit. And then you use that paste, and it won't shrink like just straight clay or shell tempered, either one. It doesn't shrink, but that can even be burnished, and even after it's burnished, then it can be fired and it just burns that away. And most of the time you can't even tell it was, but that's part of my body experience too. When I started doing body work, we even made most of our tools. So I've had to figure things out like that.
Turned out to be the perfect background. So do you use that fiber temper in all of your pots now?
No, not
Okay.
all of them. Like a real slick show pot, if I do use it, I put on a heavy slip that it'll just suck that slip right into that fiber, see, and then I can burnish that. Or you can even burnish the fiber tempered and still come out with a nice slick pot. But it's, to me, it's something that definitely, I think most of them used in their clays. Even the shell tempered, I still feel like that. And the oldest pottery found on this continent was on the Savannah River in Georgia on Stallings Island. And you could clearly see that they were using palmetto and Spanish moss. And it was a very thick pottery. And the thing about the fiber tempering, they make what they call a new fiber tempered clay that you can order. But it's paper, and all it is toilet paper.
How interesting.
But it's a wood base where mine's a vegetable base. And I feel like it works better.
They've only recently started making that, right? The
Yes,
clay,
it's
the commercial
something
clay with
new.
paper.
They call it new.
Yeah.
And I told the lady over the pottery store here in town, she was telling me about it, and I said, well, they're about 5,000 years too late. That was they already had that technology.
Good for you.
And that's how old they say it was about 5,000 years.
5,000 years old, wow. Well, what is an early award that you won?
Well, I feel like I've done some of my best work when I first started. I won some best of shows in Cherokee, North Carolina, 5 civilized tribes. And
Now, was this with your sculpture or was it with pottery?
that was with pottery. And it was a black drink set that had the shell cups and made into clay. And their first shell cups they made out of shell, they deteriorate. The clay cups that they interpreted into shell, they survive, so they find more shell clay cups than they do the actual shell cups. So that was the first major award. I won Best of Show in North Carolina.
And was that your first time going out there as well?
Yes, that was the first time.
What was that like?
Oh, it was good. I really enjoyed it. And I won, I think, 4 first place. That was the first time I went. And one of them was a monolithic axe that I carved out of stone.
Wow.
And then I did some beadwork too that won first place. I enjoy doing beadwork, but you can't get, well, pottery's the same way. You can't get what you need out of pottery, the work you put into it. When you start processing clay and things like this, if you kept your time doing that, there's no way they'd pay what you'd get into it. Now, some of the potters put that kind of price on them, but I don't feel like they get that. And I feel embarrassed to even put that kind of price on them.
How did you go about pricing your work? Because that is tricky.
Well, it's still tricky for me. Now that pot behind you there, I've got so much time in that. And it looks very simple, but that's one of the hardest pieces I've ever done.
What made it so hard?
The carving.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've done Dr. J. Wiggins has it. It's the spider that was up on top of it.
Yes, I saw that online. It was beautiful.
And it's, he had 4 of my pieces being shown at the Crystal Bridge Gallery in Bentonville, Arkansas for, it's been probably 6 months or so. I think the show's over now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just things, that's my biggest awards, is just people liking my work.
And one piece that I saw that I really liked, I saw online, was a turtle that comes apart. So the
yes,
shell,
yes.
which reminded me of traditional stories about the turtle before he got his shell.
Well, that represents, in fact, that's what I call it. It's their means of getting to Oklahoma, the little people. So they had a real slow journey.
That's great.
But it never did any really good in shows.
Was it a piece you ended up keeping, or?
No, Eli Grayson in Tulsa. He ended up buying that, and I'm really glad it went to him too. He
Yes.
really appreciates
Yes.
things like that.
So how many shows do you typically do a year?
Oh, I don't know. I used to do Herd Museum. I won't go there anymore. Santa Fe Market, I probably won't ever go back there.
Is that because just of the inventory?
It's
you
just
have to
such a
have?
hard trip, and yeah, in the inventory you have to supply your own tables, and they provide no security. Then you have to set up every morning before people come in, or if you leave it at night, it's unsecured. So you have to pack everything up and all. So it's, Santa Fe especially is it's just not artist friendly.
Hard on potters anyway.
Yeah,
Jewelers.
it's really
and
hard on potters and
other
sculptors and
Easier. Yeah.
people like this.
Right.
Jewelers and people that make pipes and things, it's not so bad.
What's been one of the most interesting or exciting shows you've gone to?
Oh, probably Herd Museum and Santa Fe Market
The first times.
and North Carolina. Catoosa is always really good, the Cherokee show. I enjoy doing that.
Have you won an award at that show?
Yes. Yes, I won quite a few first place awards there.
That's terrific.
And probably the best piece that I feel like I've done is there's one in the White House.
Oh, great.
So, and then
Along with Jerry Bedford's pot, huh? Do you have a pot in the Oval Office, or?
and then Museum of the Red River, they have 2 of my pieces, and like Dr. Wiggins has some of my pieces. I have one in the Supreme Court here in Oklahoma City, and just places like this mainly is. And most of my pieces usually that I have some of my regular people that collect my art. Yeah, there was a lady in Maryland that usually just kept a running tab with me for a long time. And I just let her pay them out, and I'd never met her before.
That's great.
Finally met her when I was in Washington at the Smithsonian.
Oh, so you went out for one of the Creek Cultural Festivals?
Yes.
Do you remember what year that was?
No, I'm not sure. It was about 3 years ago, I think.
Okay.
So,
What was that experience like?
oh, it was really good. I was kind of disappointed in the actual museum there at the Capitol grounds.
Why is that?
Oh, the way they had it displayed and all.
Not a lot of things on view for.
No, and the way they had them on view and all, I just didn't appreciate it very well. But I've done Moundville. That was one of my real memorable experiences, is just artists there giving demos and lectures on, and I was doing one on finish work,
On how to finish a
how to
pot?
finish a pot. But we had one lady there that was Tammy Bean. She's been doing restoration work for museums for a long time. And she was doing some firing. And then I was demoing, and Jane Austin, she was demoing. And then we gave, like I say, lectures on some of our techniques and how we finish pieces. So I really enjoyed that. Everything was just very relaxed and
Yeah, great group.
just really a camp out as much as anything.
Great group of artists.
Yes, some of the best was there. Yes.
Have you gotten any requests to do reproduction work for museums?
Not from museum, yes, the Chickasaw Cultural Center. They commissioned me to do one stone piece, and then I have 3 pots in there. Now, if you ask to see them, they'll say that it's all Chickasaw work. But I was commissioned to do 3 pots in the Mississippian
Kind
style.
of, right, replicate.
So that's,
How much of your work is commission work?
oh, I get quite a few commissions off the internet. I just sent one, a woman in California wanted a wedding vase, my own special design with the open heart in the center. She wanted that for her daughter, and they had already bought one off of me before. And then her son saw one of my fire pots and he wanted one of those, so I built that, sent it here lately. And then the lady in Maryland, I've done quite a few for her, and just people like that want a special piece. She even had a Peruvian piece that it got broken, and she wanted another one built like it.
Okay.
So I built that for her.
It's a little bit different from a painter who might have somebody like suggest a subject.
Yeah.
Because you're actually duplicating more, maybe a form that you've done before. Do you try each time to do something different? Or?
Well, they're always different because they're hand built. But I had one occasion at Herd Museum, when I first went out there, a lady came by and looked at my work, didn't stay very long, and came back right at the end of the show and wanted a certain water bottle that I had there. And a lady just bought it and I was packing it up for her. And about half made her mad. And I told her I can reproduce another one, but it won't be just like that, but I can get it close. So she went ahead and ordered it, and I think she is from North Carolina or somewhere like that. Anyway, when I was doing it, I really did my best to satisfy her, and it came out better than the one she has wanted. So I like to do pieces like that and really satisfy them.
Right.
And then I've had occasions of some of the people I know, he bought one off of a lady, and his wife decided to wash it off after a year or so, and it melted in her hands. So that's when I started guaranteeing my pieces. So I've learned how to even repair pieces that people have had broken, and I just tell them, if I can't fix it, I'll just make you a new one. And that's how I stand behind my work.
That's a pretty good deal.
There's a lady in Washington, well, at the Smithsonian. She bought one off of me, and her cleaning lady knocked it off and broke it. And she called me and asked me about it. I said, send it to me, and if I can't fix it, I'll make another one. And she sent it, and I was able to repair it. She wanted the same pot, so you couldn't tell it's ever been broken.
That's good. So how often do you end up having to repair a pot? Or?
And not very often.
Thank
I've
goodness.
had to repair a couple of my communication whistles where they wear them around their neck and they've broken a leg off or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to guarantee those. They're so fragile.
Right.
But I still do it. I still guarantee them, but those are the only ones. And then most of them were just accidents that people have. Dr. Wiggins had 2 pieces of Victoria Vasquez pieces, and he had somebody break in his house, and they weren't even looking at it, getting his art. They were after TVs and stuff, and knocked off 2 of hers, and they were in bad shape. But I was able to repair those and put them back even nearly to the same color.
Wow.
So he's another one that can vouch for me. And then Victoria herself blew the side out of one. And when I got done with it, you could not find where it had ever been broken. So
Well, that metal.
I can do those things, and I'm the only one I know that guarantees their pottery.
Right.
I don't know of anyone. I did a show in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and there was a Choctaw girl there that sold a piece to a lady, and she put it in a Walmart sack, and she turned around to walk away, and the bottom fell out and hit the floor, and it's yours. That's the way. I can't do that. I would have to let her picked out another pot, or I'd have made her another one. I just can't do that. That's the way I was raised. And so.
When did you do your first effigy piece?
Oh, well, it was one of my first. I've done 2 big effigies of a kneeling female. And I gave one to the court in Okmulgee
Mm-hmm.
at the Supreme Court building down there.
Mm-hmm.
Judge down there, he supported me a lot, and so I just gave that to him. And then I made a salt pan for him too, that I gave that to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece, a lady from Missouri came down especially to buy it. She saw it on the website. And when she came in to get it, her mother was a girl that I went to high school with, graduated from high school with. And we didn't even know that.
That's funny.
But I have one that it's a little man sitting with his hands crossed on his knees, and I have it packed away. I'll probably have it at Red Earth, but I've done 2 of those.
How about head pots? Were they something you got into later, or?
Well, I've done quite a few head pots. It was one of them was on display at the Bristol Bridge Gallery of Dr. Wiggins' piece, and it was one of my better pieces. And I would call it very contemporary. It was solid red, which I call Old Town Red, and it was really a nice piece.
What's your favorite format in terms of pottery or ceramic?
Favorite form?
Yeah. Favorite
Probably
thing to make?
bottles.
Bottles?
Bottles probably, or jars like that one there.
Why?
The bottles just have such a much better form and shape to them. And then I like to do the highly carved,
Right.
which takes lots of time, and you never get your price for what you put into one, but that's what I enjoy doing.
And I understand Creek Nation has asked you to do a couple pottery workshops in June.
Yes.
Are these the first workshops you've taught?
No. I've
For the
done
nation?
2 or 3 for the Chickasaws. And
Okay.
I don't know. There have been quite a few I've done. And I enjoy doing those. They just don't give you enough time though to go. I like to teach from the ground up. Finding the clay, processing the clay, and let them really see what's involved in making a piece before you come to the final form. And this is the part I like to do, is really showing people that you just don't take and go buy some clay and make a piece like what I do. And I know a lot of them use just commercial clay, and I don't care. And clay is clay to me. Now they do put some things in clay you buy that I don't even like to breathe the stuff. They put barium and things like this in it that I don't like to use.
Goodness.
And then a lot of the potters, they use, I call it swamp clay, where it's been settled out and dried, you know how it'll curl up.
Mm-hmm.
But this is runoff from fields and stuff with the herbicides and the insecticides and stuff that's in the clay that I don't like to handle. I like a real good deep clay that is not going to have that much stuff in it, which I'm sure they do have some, as much of it as we have anymore, but I like a deep clay, and then you know you've got a good clay with not a lot of foreign matter in it too.
Right, right,
And the settled out clay is good clays. I'm not knocking it. I just don't like to use it because of those things.
right.
And breathing it and everything, you've got a lot of dust involved. Just rubbing unfired pots, you've got dust stirring up that I don't like to. I just don't like to breathe it. So
You're in the process of moving your home and studio, I guess, from Oklahoma City to Cushing. And
yes, it
yeah,
looks like I'm gonna have to do that. I just can't fire here in the city anymore. I was firing in the backyard one day and I warned my neighbors, but I went back out there and I couldn't even see my neighbor's backyard for the smoke. And so I still do some back there, but it's so hard to do in the open and all, so I'm gonna move to one of the steel sheds down there. It'll have an open front on it. I'll have a sliding door over it where I can secure it well. But I'm gonna start trying to do all my firing down there. And the weather we have, at the time you wanna do it, the weather's always so bad that you just can't do that. It's just hard to do.
yeah, and potters, you're even more
Yeah.
subject to the weather than
Yeah,
a lot of other artists.
and even though some of them still fire in a kiln or double fire, I don't care. That doesn't bother me.
Right.
But it's harder to do, and you have lots of failures when
And you
you're
did,
doing pit firing.
right. And you did find some clay, I guess, down in
Yes,
Cushing. You want to tell us? You don't
I
have to tell
found
us.
a new bed of clay on our farm at Cushing that I've made one little pinch pot just to see how it worked, and I don't just roll it out a piece and fire it in a kiln to see if it's going to work, or even put it in a pit. I figure if I'm going to be messing with it, I might as well be making something with it. But I love the color of it and everything after it's fired. And I think it's going to be a really good clay to work with. I just like to dig my clay from where I came from, which I'll still be using some of that. But I'm going to concentrate on the farm more for my clay, and I really think it's going to be really good. So
That's exciting. Well, you've told us a little bit about your technical process, but let's talk about your design work maybe. Have you created your own materials for incising and cross-hatching? And
yes, and my design is like that piece right there. It's a traditional design, but in a different manner of putting it on the pot. And I try to have something different on my table all the time. To do reproduction work on a wheel or something, and I'm not knocking a wheel, that's an art all of its own. And those people that do that, it just amazes me. And I even took a course at the art center to do that, and I didn't have any failures, but boy, it's not for me. It's nastier. You waste more of your clay, and I can't be wasting my clay when I do that. Processing my own clay, I don't like to waste any of it. I saved the dust off of it.
What about firing materials? Do you experiment with different firing
Yes, I was getting a real good color that looked just nearly like bronze. It was a chocolate brown that I was using box elder leaves from my backyard, and I've had to take it out now. But I still believe I can do it with like elm leaves or something and not fire it as hot.
Neat. And were
That's
the
the
leaves
hardest.
green, or were the leaves green, or are they dried? Green?
Dried, always
Okay.
dried. Yeah, I've never used.
I guess they won't fire.
I've never used green.
Okay.
If you use green or I like to use pine bark to get my good blacks, but I don't like for it to touch my piece. So I take either a piece that I special make to put over the piece and then fire it underneath the piece. It's already in reduction, see. This is another thing, I don't know if anyone else does that or not, but I just put my combustible around the pot, put the other one on top, and then I start just a slow fire and then build it up where I can build a real hot fire. And then the piece that you built, if it cracks, it don't. I've wired them together and everything till I wear them out. So, Mata Ortiz, I think they do a firing kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
But even down some of the sites down in the southeast, they've actually found beehive kills on some of the sites that I'm sure they probably learned from Europeans or something that they actually found.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been told by some of my elders they would make they called it a keyhole kill, and you would dig back in like a creek bank and then hollow it out in the middle, and then they would cover that with a big rock and earth, but they'd have a ventilation out the back just like you would and they'd build a fire in the opening of the kill.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my Creek ancestors did that. I found that out from some of the actual elders that remember how they did it. So
That might be fun to try on the farm.
I've never tried it, but I do have a good place I can try it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'd have to build a really hot fire to get it to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And really fire them good. And that's another thing that I really get my pots hot. I mean, I build a real fire on them. That's like down at the festival I did down at Moundville. Tammy Bean was out firing the pots while I was demonstrating, and they was out there heating them up and everything, and she come and asked me if I had a piece that I'd want to fire, and I said, well, yeah, I've got a piece here. And I had it in one of these metal cookie cans, and it was a plate, and they're usually really bad about cracking. And I just told her, I said, I usually fire them. I'm rocking again, I'm sorry. But I told her, I said, go ahead and fire everybody else's and have mine firing too. But when you get through with the firing, I said, build a real fire on top of mine. I mean, get it hot. And a little bit here she came, she said, oh Scott, I've heard some pinging and stuff. She said, I know I've broken that pot. And I said, that's fine. I told you to do that. And I looked over there and she had a bonfire on it.
Oh.
And, but anyway, when it cooled down a little bit, I just drug it out with a stick and pulled the lid off of it, and had the most beautiful black plate you ever saw.
Wow.
So it just blew their minds. But I just had some newspapers there. I just wadded them up and stuck it in there with it. I had it packed in that. I just let them use the packing. But it was a beautiful black plate.
That's a great.
They couldn't believe it.
Do you draw out your designs before you work on the pots, or do you just go to work?
No, I do everything after it's dry, and no one else I know does that. I do my designs, I carve them, everything dry, and then I burnish them dry.
Do you have a pencil outline on the clay or not?
Some I do, yeah. I'll figure out, I've made some just circles out of poster board and mark your 4 points. Everything's done with you. The creeks did everything in the 4 cardinal directions. And then I just set that down, mark those spots to give me a rough idea of where to start from. And then I'll just start from there. And when you've got the lines close, I just guess at everything. I just start and I'll make it about 1/4 of an inch from the other and just start doing the circles.
How do you title your pieces?
Title them.
Do you title pieces?
That's as hard to me as pricing. Yes, they're hard to title. The one head pot, I think Dr. Wiggins got, it was Fallen Warrior, and that's how and then I'll do things that represent the different clans, and I'll call it that.
We'll look for your signature when we look at your pieces, but was that, how did you come up with your
Hand and I.
Okay, yeah. Is that what you used?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a very universal
Right.
design that's found all over the world. And like in Israel, it's the evil eye. And my rendition of it, it's the hand of our Father watching over humanity.
What is your creative process from the time you get an idea
To actually create.
to start something? Do you keep a notebook, or do you?
No, mainly I just, I will start a piece maybe I see in a book, and then I just let the pot build itself. It will just build itself once you start. And that's usually when I come up with my better pieces.
Will you have the book close to you, or is this a mental image?
Oh, mostly a mental image, so it won't be exactly like that. Is the way I usually do it.
And then how about your creative routine? Do you work in the morning or at night, or?
Oh, whenever I can, and then I get some of my best ideas when I'm trying to go to sleep at night. And I have very bad sleep apnea. So
Do you sometimes end up working then?
I get up and I'll draw out even a design that I've come up with. That's how I came up with the spider design. I had to get up and
Oh, okay.
draw this out. Instead of having it drawn on the pot, I actually did a spider on the pot. And it's a very hard process when you make those legs and stuff to fire that and them not shrink everything and not
proportions.
crack. I've only successfully done 2.
Are they both spider pots? Were they both spiders that you did?
Yes,
I
both of
see.
them were spiders.
Yeah, that is on
And
mine.
then I
That's-
did the one of the turtle and the little man sitting on it
Right,
with the lid.
right.
Yeah.
Well, looking back on your career so far as a professional artist, what was one fork in the road moment when you could have gone one way and you chose to go another?
Oh, when I was actually wanting to do sculptures. And that's why I like to do an effigy. I really, and I call my pots sculpted pots. They're not thrown on a wheel, they're handmade. And I do a completely different style of coiling than anyone else. I call it tuck and roll,
Okay.
where I roll the coil down inside the pot. And then as I do that, I roll it under. I hold my coil here. And then I take my thumb and the clay on the side becomes the rim. And as you do that, you're constantly wedging the clay, see? So you have no seams to deal with when you get through. Where you stack your coils, you always have a tendency of it cracking in one of those seams. So this way you constantly, you're wedging that. And then I found out later from the lady that does my website, she saw a thing where they were doing a version of what I do, and it was they say the oldest style of coiling known to man, and it's called Asian wedge coiling.
Because you had just come up with this on your own through
Yes.
experimentation.
Yes.
Wow.
And when you come at the end of a coil, you don't have to score that and slip it, and I just tuck another one there and just keep right on coiling.
Mhm.
And when I really want to get with one, I can throw it up nearly as fast as you can on a wheel. But it's just things that I came up with, and you can take and do a pot like that. I can show them demos. I'll take a wire cutter and cut it in 2, and you use 2 different styles of clay, 2 different colors of clay, and you can actually see where the inside coil actually works to the outside then, see, when you're doing that. And you won't find any bubbles in my coiling because I'm constantly wedging the clay.
Wow. That's really neat.
And then my finishing, I do it dry because I leave no burnish marks in the clay. If you do it when it's leather hard, you always have some of those burnish marks in it. Where I take it and then I put an oil on it after it's dry, and then I'll just dampen that spot. And you're just damping the surface, you're just burnishing the surface of the pot by doing that.
Wow. What's been one of the high points of your career? You might have mentioned it, but
Oh, mainly being able to sell a piece to a person that I know that will really appreciate what I've done. And like I had a young boy, he was about 18 years old, and he came to my booth, and I could tell he was serious. And he wanted to know why they were so high. And so I started explaining to him the process. And I went through the complete process, how I processed the clay all the way up to finishing a piece. And when I got through, he looked at me and he said, "You're too cheap." And he was really serious. He wanted to know
He understood.
the technique, and that's my high points. Or then when I have a group that was at Red Earth one year that were, it was a blind group from Tulsa that came in, and most of the other people was just scared to death is gonna touch their pieces. And when they come to mine, I handed them to them. And they could tell you everything about that pot when they got through with it. I mean, they just stayed, and I had to explain the whole. And my high point is teaching people about the art and the history of the tribe. I spend 90% of my time teaching people, and that's my high points, is when I can explain to them the history of our tribe, and that's really the main thing that's my high point.
How about a low point?
The failures, when you work 2 weeks or so on a piece and you crack it in the firing. And that was one of the main reasons I started figuring on how to repair. Now I won't repair a piece and put it out for sale as a new piece. I'll tell them about it, and if they want it then, that's fine. I've had 4 pieces at the Jewish Museum in Tulsa that they've had a long time, and I got over there and they had already packed my stuff, and I unwrapped them this morning and they'd chipped the rim on one of them. So that's just something you have to deal with. Now it's not bad enough that I'll fix that little spot and it's good as new. I probably won't even add any clay to it.
It'll take time. Well, is there anything we've forgotten to cover or you'd like to add before we look at your pots?
No, it's just I hate to do all the research that I've done and then show someone they just pick your brain and show them the technique and everything, and then they'll get up in a demo and claim they've been doing that for 10,000 years, and it's always 10,000 years. So there's some of it, if I can't find a Creek artist that's interested, I'll take it to my grave from now on. I don't like that when they won't give you the benefit of the doubt in me, the research and the experimenting and everything I did to get to that point, especially my repair work and all. I don't tell them everything. And that was one, but they're doing that every day. They'll get up in their demo and say they've been doing that forever. And they might have, but they still don't have all of my secrets to it. That's one of the things that I think they can try it and it's not going to work.
It would be nice to have a young Creek person who we could pass that on to.
And it's hard to find any in the Creek tribe that's really interested, and I don't know why. And it's mostly elderly people that
they come to the workshops. They're older people.
Come to the workshops, yeah.
We've got to change that. Well, we'll pause for a minute and take a look at your work.
Okay.
Okay, you want to tell us about this pot?
Yeah, you want me to pick it up or?
You can, or you can just talk about it.
Well,
standing
I'll
close
just
to it.
talk about it.
All right.
These were mainly found in northeastern Arkansas, and they were of a quapaw design. They're the ones that done most of these. There has been others found other places, different designs, but this is from a piece that I have seen, only I did it in a contemporary look.
And you're talking about partially the way the face is painted.
Yes, the way the face is changed. Most of them will have the teeth showing here. They call it the death grin, which I took that out of this one. And this would have represented tattooing on the face. And you found a lot of that with the native tribes. They tattooed. And they all nearly have this suspension hole here. And a lot of them, they'll put a piece of horsehair or something out of it. Mm-hmm. But I think it was mainly for suspension. And a lot of them say that they built one of these to represent their Minko or chief, which I don't believe that. I believe it was to represent a trophy they took in battle, and they honored the people that they took in battle for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And they're usually always found with a grave. Okay. So this is what, and they'll always nearly have the holes in the ears where they would have probably put some kind of a decorative thing in that. And this would actually be a shell piece that would go in the ear. And a lot of them would have the shell stem coming out the back on both sides, and then it would tie in the back. They'd put a hole through that shell, and that's how they held it in.
Oh, okay.
And then most of them had the red hair, and I don't know the significance. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of research on the black paint, and I can't even find from archaeologists what they used, how they got the red, blacks, and whites. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, it was from a resist, and I've tried all kinds of resist, and I can't make it work. Mm. But I have found out you can use boil black locust sap, mm-hmm. and use that sap and about any kind of a syrup type, and then that'd be a post firing where you just put it up like you're warming it to fire it, and you scorch it in just like you'd scorch a pan. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now this is the only way I've been able to do it. Wow. In a post firing. Mm-hmm. And if anyone knows, I'd like to know it, but colors is something I've always been interested in too. Right. The Key Marco, Florida, they have the wooden deer. Now I've done one to represent it, but I used commercial colors on it. Mm-hmm. But since then I have found how they made their blue. Mm-hmm. And it's from a tree, it's a mulberry, not mulberry like ours. Mulberry mixed with ground shell, and the ground shell turns it blue. Wow. Wow. But just this is some of my research that mm-hmm. other people don't do. Mm-hmm. That and then their fixative, it's the strangular fig in Florida. And they've researched it, they've analyzed it, and it's natural latex. It's just like the rubber tree in South America.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's their fixative they would use on their pieces. Most of those, when they dug them up out of bogs, they just deteriorated immediately. They did some beautiful masks and things like this out of wood.
That makes sense for that
And most of our tribes had a totem at their village to represent their clan, like it'd be a fish, or Gar clan, they would have a carved fish. And the eagle was very highly represented in our tribe, and they would do a figure of an eagle. So this is just some of the stuff that I've learned from my studying the history.
Right. Okay, how about this piece, Scott?
Okay, it would actually represent in our tribe the wind clan. It's your circling of the winds in your 4 cardinal directions. And if you look on nearly all of my pots, you've also got the 4 cardinal directions.
Right.
And the actual deep carved area here for that design, it's actually I got my idea from the Southwest potters of there. So this would be a very contemporary version of our style then, see.
Right.
This is my own design, in other words.
It's just beautiful.
And I will probably call it a paraphernalia pot, something like that, that they would keep some of their sacred stuff in, or even mix maybe the black drink in it, something like that. I had one that's another one that Eli got, wasn't it? But it was echoes of the past, and you could actually get here and you can see it, you can hear the echo in it.
A great
And,
idea.
But I really liked my design, but it was a very hard piece to carve and get everything symmetrical. I like to take a piece and look down from the top and see how symmetrical I got it.
Wow, yes.
See,
Yes.
you can usually tell.
Amazing.
And also I'll have my 4 cardinal directions here, right here, and then in all of my designs. And that's how our tribe built their sacred fire. They would build it in a cross, and they would feed the logs in from the outside.
So what can you tell us about this pot?
Well, it represents a medicine bottle, and this represents your medicine blossom around here. And then you also have your sun circle here with your sunburst looking down on top of it. And then you have your serpent design here.
Right. Beautiful.
And I must have seen this on one of our brochures or something. The boy that does the tourism, he said that was close to what their design is. So I don't know if I'd seen it and got it in my head. It's my
Just
own
subconsciously.
carving that I just came up with
Right.
to represent the medicine blossom and all.
And your signature is on there. You want to show us that?
Let me see if it's on there to where you can see it. It's on there, but it's very hard to see.
We may choose another pot to take a look at it.
They're usually hard to see.
All right, how about this?
Well, this would also represent the Wind clan
Right.
in our tribe. And this is actually a Caddoan design. But it has the same, I don't know if they have the same meaning, but this is what ours is your 4 cardinal directions. Representing the wind, and even here you've got your 4 cardinal directions.
And just brilliant burnish on that too. Neat. Okay, looking at another wing frame.
What I actually do is late woodland, early Mississippian culture. And I don't call them Creek, Cherokee, Caddo. It's just the Mississippian culture is what I do, or mound builders.
Mm-hmm.
And the Creeks were definitely very deep into the mound building. And at one time was the largest tribe in the Southeast.
Right.
And your Choctaws, your Chickasaws, your Seminoles, and Creek all speak a dialect of the Muskogean language. The Cherokees speak the Iroquoian dialect, a variation of it. They have their own, but it's a variation of the Iroquoian.
Mm-hmm.
But this piece also represents the four cardinal directions, and I haven't really explained anything about the red. Red in our tribe means war. White represents peace. We had a peace culture and a war culture. They both worked together, had their festivals together, but they decided on war and peace.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, somebody that had committed murder could come to a peace clan, the white clan, and could stay there until they were sure and then they were put off on their own to do what they wanted to with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you could seek refuge in a white clan.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, and finally, you were going to tell us about this piece.
Well, this is what they called as a fire pot, and that's how they transferred their fires from one dwelling to another. They'd always put out the flame at the busk, which was usually in around July. They would put out their fire. They would even burn or do away with their old clothing. Everything was to be new.
Mm-hmm.
And they say even some of the later versions, some of the Creek people would actually say like their vows to be with each other for another year. They would get their coal of fire and carry it to their new dwelling.
Mm.
And a lot of them would do this every year. And a lot of your grounds people said, no, they don't do that. They just did it for transferring fire. But I was told this, so I don't know for sure. And I know some of the later model ones, they use this. But they even, on hunting trips, you could put some ashes in the bottom of this and put a coal of fire in this. You could cover that, bank it with some more ashes. And they had one, they put leather thongs right here on both sides, and they carried that, and they would actually have one person tending the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they camped at night, they already had a fire. So, but this was the main purpose, was transporting fire.
Right.
And then you see these things here, they always have these knobs on them, and I have no idea what that's for unless it was just not as hot there.
Help pick it
But
up
they
a little
always
bit.
had the handles they could handle it with, so I just don't know the purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And I guess to wind up, let's take a look at your signature, the OG on the bottom of the, is it pretty visible in
Yeah.
that one too? Okay,
Does it?
let's see. Yeah, you can see it there. Let's see, reposition a little bit. Okay, great. And Scott, and you've got your name on there too, and the
Yes.
date. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Scott.